It is something that weighs on your mind more often than you care to admit to anyone else. Late at night, once the emails have finally stopped arriving and the house goes silent, you find yourself running the calculations. You run the numbers on exactly how much longer you would need to keep working at your current velocity. You imagine what daily life might look like if you did not have a mandatory obligation to show up somewhere every single morning. You wonder if the people who seem to have this whole thing figured out possess some secret knowledge that you are missing. You have likely watched videos similar to this one in the past. You read the recommended books and saved the inspirational posts. You grasp the fundamental conceptually. Spend less money than you earn. Invest the difference wisely and allow compound interest to work its magic over a long horizon. And yet, the chasm between knowing what to do and actually doing it feels impossibly vast. Your savings account isn't expanding as rapidly as it should be. The retirement calculator spit out figures that feel like a cruel, practical joke. That vague sensation that you are running out of valuable time keeps getting louder, even though you aren't entirely certain what it is you are running out of time for. Here's what I would tell anyone feeling this exact way. True financial freedom is not actually complicated. It is not exclusively reserved for individuals with massive incomes, extreme luck, or some esoteric knowledge that only a select few receive. The path is actually remarkably straightforward once you comprehend what it truly demands. What makes it difficult isn't the underlying strategy. What makes it hard is that almost everything you have ever been taught about money by the education system, by broader society, and by well-meaning individuals who never achieved it themselves, is almost perfectly engineered to prevent you from reaching that goal. This video contains everything I wish someone had sat down and told me years ago. Not the surface-level, generic advice you have heard 1,000 times already, but the actual operational framework that separates the people who achieve financial freedom from the people who merely daydream about it. Some of what follows will feel uncomfortable to hear. Good. That feeling of discomfort is usually a strong indicator that you are hearing something you genuinely need to hear. Let's get into it. Before anything else happens, you have to actually believe that financial freedom is a possibility for you specifically, not just as an abstract concept for others, but as something you personally can achieve within a reasonable amount of time. This sounds incredibly obvious, but it is not. Most people claim they desire financial freedom while secretly believing it is a total pipe dream for them. They will diet for a single week while telling themselves they just aren't the type of person who can stick with it long term. They will start a new budget while assuming they will eventually abandon it, just like every other budget that came before it. The belief doesn't necessarily have to come first, but it has to exist somewhere in the process. If you genuinely think financial freedom is impossible for someone in your current situation, you will unconsciously sabotage every single strategy you attempt. You will quit after 1 month. You will convince yourself the approach doesn't work for people like you. You will find evidence everywhere you look that confirms what you already deeply suspected, that this is for other people, not for you. How do you construct belief when you don't currently possess it? You consume the stories of regular people who actually did it, not the billionaires and the massive tech founders. Their stories usually involve too much survivorship bias and luck to be easily replicable. Look for the people who went from normal, average salaries to financial freedom within 7 to 10 years. The teachers and nurses and mid-level managers who figured out what the majority never do. These stories absolutely exist. There are thousands upon thousands of them out there. When you immerse yourself deeply enough in them, something shifts mentally. What once felt totally impossible starts feeling like a repeatable pattern you could follow yourself. Read a book a month, listen to a podcast episode every day. Do whatever works best for your schedule. The goal isn't just gathering information. It is rewiring what your brain considers to be normal life. After 6 months of consistently consuming financial freedom content, the very idea of working until age 65 starts feeling insane. The idea of achieving freedom within a decade starts feeling inevitable. That shift in your baseline expectation changes everything that follows it. But belief alone is not enough. You need a reason strong enough to survive the difficult parts of the journey. Financial freedom requires doing things that are immediately uncomfortable for years before you see the major results. Skipping expensive dinners out while your friends order another round of drinks. driving a much older car while your coworkers upgrade to brand new vehicles, living in a smaller apartment than the bank says you could technically afford, saying no to purchases that everyone around you seems to say yes to without a second thought. These sacrifices are relatively easy to make for a week, maybe even for a single month. But this isn't a month-long project. This is a multi-year lifestyle transformation. Without a clear, driving reason behind the sacrifice, you will quit the very moment it gets hard. And it absolutely will get hard. There will be a night when you are tired and frustrated and the credit card is sitting right there and the thing you want is right there, and the voice in your head says, "What is even the point of any of this deprivation?" In that specific moment, abstract goals like financial freedom will not save you. What saves you is specificity. Knowing exactly what you are working toward building. Knowing exactly what you are running away from. For some people, it is more time with their children. Actually, being physically and mentally present for the childhood moments, instead of hearing about them secondhand after a long day at work. For others, it is the escape from work they actively despise. The deep knowledge that they cannot spend 40 more years doing something that drains them of life energy. For others, it is the ability to travel freely or to financially help family members or to pursue creative work without worrying constantly about whether it pays the monthly bills. Whatever that reason is for you, it needs to be specific enough to feel real, emotional enough to matter when you are exhausted, clear enough that you can visualize it instantly. Write it down somewhere you will see it constantly, not because writing it down has some magical property, but because you will desperately need that reminder when motivation disappears entirely. Once you have the belief and a strong reason, you need to understand the actual math, because most people are working toward the completely wrong number. The traditional approach states you need to save 25 times your annual expenses to retire permanently. If you spend $42,000 a year, that means you need over $1 million. If you spend $84,000, that is over $2 million. You invest that massive sum of money, live off the investment returns, and never work another day. This is known as the FIRE approach. Financial independence, retire early. And for some people, it works perfectly. But for the vast majority of people, especially those starting out with normal incomes, this number is so large that it feels totally unreachable. If you are currently making $52,000 or $62,000 a year, even incredibly aggressive saving might take 20 years to hit that target. By the time you are finished, you've spent the absolute best decades of your life grinding toward a finish line that kept moving further away from you. Here is the realization that changed everything for me personally. Traditional retirement is the wrong goal. The idea of never working again sounds very appealing in theory. In practice, research shows that people who retire early often become clinically depressed within months. The driven, ambitious types of people who achieve early financial freedom are usually the exact people who need something meaningful to work on. Complete and total retirement makes them miserable. So if full retirement isn't actually what you want, the math changes dramatically. Instead of saving 25 times your total annual expenses, you need a much simpler number to focus on. How much does it cost to barely keep you alive each month? Not your current comfortable lifestyle, not the idealized version you are imagining. The actual baseline financial cost of your existence. Housing, basic transportation, food staples, insurance, the genuine essentials only. For most people, that number is far lower than they think it is. Maybe it is $3,200 a month, maybe $4,200. The moment you calculate that number accurately, financial freedom transforms from a distant fantasy into a concrete, achievable target. Because now the major question isn't, how do I save $1 million? The question becomes, how do I create reliable streams of income that cover my baseline expenses without requiring a traditional 40-hour job? That is a completely different type of problem to solve. And it is solvable within years, not decades. This is where your expenses become your most powerful lever. Lowering your monthly costs isn't just about saving a few extra dollars. It is about making freedom mathematically easier to achieve. Every single dollar you remove from your monthly baseline expenses is a dollar you do not need to generate through passive income streams. If you can reduce your expenses from $8,500 a month down to $4,250, you have just cut the difficulty rating of reaching freedom literally in half. Housing matters the most here. For the majority of Americans, housing consumes 32% or more of their total budget. If you can eliminate or dramatically reduce that one major cost, you have removed the single biggest obstacle standing in the way of freedom. House hacking is one major strategy that works. Buy a 2 to 4 unit property using an FHA loan with only 3.5% down. Live in one of the units yourself. Rent out the others to tenants. If you do the math correctly beforehand, your tenants can cover your entire mortgage payment, meaning your personal housing cost effectively drops to zero. This isn't some theoretical concept. People do this successfully every single year. First-time home buyers with totally normal incomes who decide to live in a duplex or triplex for a few years, while the rental income completely covers their housing cost. The sacrifice is very real. You might have to live in a less desirable neighborhood, deal with tenant issues occasionally, and spend weekends fixing things that break. But the math is undeniable. Zero housing cost changes absolutely everything. If house hacking isn't possible for your specific situation, other valid approaches exist. Moving to a much lower cost of living area, downsizing significantly to a smaller space, getting roommates, or living with family temporarily while you build up income streams. None of these options are glamorous. All of them accelerate the timeline dramatically. Transportation follows the exact same principle. The average new car payment today exceeds $790 monthly. Add insurance, fuel, and routine maintenance, and you are easily spending over $1,100 per month for transportation alone. Buy a reliable used car for $6,000 to $11,000 in cash. Drive it for 3 to 5 years. Sell it afterward for roughly what you paid for it. You've just freed up over $1,000 monthly that would have otherwise gone to depreciation and interest payments. Food completes the financial picture. Strategic meal planning saves hundreds of dollars monthly. Batch cooking meals on weekends eliminates expensive daily lunches. Cutting back significantly on restaurants and delivery apps keeps more money in your pocket. None of these individual changes feel transformative on their own. Combined, they can reduce your total monthly expenses by 45 to 65%. That reduction doesn't just save you money. It fundamentally changes how quickly freedom becomes achievable. Now here's something most people completely misunderstand about the path forward. Your current job is not the vehicle that will carry you to financial freedom, but it can fund the vehicle that eventually will. Most people get their current salary, calculate how long it would take to save enough at that specific rate, and despair entirely. The numbers just don't work out. 20 or 30 years of aggressive savings still leaves them short of the goal, so they conclude that financial freedom isn't possible for someone at their income level. What they are missing is that the job isn't supposed to get you all the way to freedom. The job is supposed to buy you time while you build something else on the side. A traditional job trades your time for money at a fixed rate. You work 40 hours, you get paid X amount. You work 60 hours, you still get paid roughly X amount. There is a hard ceiling. No matter how good you get at that job, the upside potential is limited. Financial freedom requires income that isn't capped in that way. Income that can scale up without requiring proportionally more of your time. Income that continues coming in even when you are not actively working. This doesn't mean quitting your job tomorrow morning. It means recognizing that your job is funding Phase 1 while you actively build toward Phase 2. Phase 1 involves using your job income to lower expenses, eliminate bad debt, build an emergency fund, and buy time for Phase 2. Phase 2 involves developing skills and income streams that have unlimited upside potential, where your earnings are tied directly to the value you create rather than the hours you clock. The job keeps the lights on while you figure out exactly what Phase 2 looks like for you. But if you never start Phase 2, you will be stuck in Phase 1 forever. Which brings us to a critical distinction most people never make. There are really only 2 fundamental types of income, and one of them will never set you free. The first type is trading time for money. You perform work, you get paid. When you stop working, the money stops immediately. Most traditional jobs work exactly this way. Most side hustles work this way too. Driving for ride-share apps, delivering food, freelancing paid by the hour. The ceiling on this type of income is the number of available hours in the day multiplied by your hourly rate. Even if you work every possible hour and command the highest possible rate, there is a maximum limit, and you can never stop without the income stopping too. The second type is scalable income. You create an asset once that generates revenue repeatedly, or you build specialized skills that allow you to charge based on value provided rather than time spent. The upside is theoretically unlimited. The income can continue even when you are not actively working on it. Examples of scalable income include digital products that sell while you sleep, content that generates ad revenue or sponsorships for years after you create it, services priced on outcome rather than hours, where a result that saves a client $55,000 justifies an $11,000 fee, regardless of how few hours it actually took you. The math on scalable income is completely different from the math on hourly work. If you deliver food for $22 an hour, working 100 extra hours generates $2,200. Working 1,000 extra hours generates $22,000. It is linear, predictable, and capped. If you build a YouTube channel or a newsletter or a course or a consulting practice, the first 100 hours might generate absolutely nothing. The first 1,000 hours might generate very little. But somewhere along the way, the compounding effect kicks in. The 10,000th hour might be generating $12,000 monthly without requiring additional work. This is the vital difference between linear income and exponential income. Linear income trades time for money forever. Exponential income invests time upfront and harvests returns indefinitely. Financial freedom almost always requires some form of exponential income. Not necessarily a massive business empire, just something that generates revenue without requiring your constant physical presence. Here is what most people miss about this transition. You need to find work you would actually want to do because you are going to be doing something for a very long time. Financial freedom doesn't mean never working again. It means never being forced to work at something you hate again. Research consistently shows that people who stop working entirely, with no projects, no contributions, no creative output, become depressed and decline rapidly. The human brain needs something to work on. Purpose isn't optional for us. This is actually good news for your financial freedom timeline. If the ultimate goal isn't to save enough to never work again, but rather to generate enough to cover baseline expenses while doing work I actually enjoy, the math becomes much more favorable. You don't need $2.1 million invested. You need income streams that cover your baseline expenses while doing something that doesn't feel like a sacrifice. Maybe that is running a small online business 10 hours a week. Maybe it's consulting for a few select clients who pay well and respect your time. Maybe it's creating content about a topic you genuinely care about. Maybe it's building products that solve problems you find interesting. The specific path matters less than the principle. Financial freedom should feel like doing more of what you want, not escaping into a life of absolutely nothing. Ask yourself seriously, if money were not an issue, what would you actually want to spend your valuable time on? What kind of work energizes you rather than drains you? What problems are you naturally drawn to solving? The answers to these questions point toward the work that should eventually replace your current job. Not work you tolerate in exchange for freedom, but work that is the freedom itself. At this point, you might be wondering whether any of this is actually achievable for someone without special talents or connections. Let me be direct about this. Building scalable income requires skills, and those skills are completely learnable. When people hear phrases like start a business or build income streams, they often panic. They assume it requires some innate talent they don't possess, some special knowledge reserved only for entrepreneurs and tech founders. It does not. Building income outside a traditional job is a skills problem, not a talent problem, and definitely not a luck problem. It is a skills problem. And skills can be learned by anyone. Every skill that generates income: copywriting, marketing, sales, product creation, content creation, automation, design, coding exists as a learnable set of principles and practices. People who are incredible at these things weren't born good at them. They learned them, usually through free resources available to anyone with an internet connection. Think about it this way. Everything that happens online is just pressing keys on a keyboard in the right order. The difference between someone making nothing and someone making six figures is literally just the specific sequence of keys they press. That might sound ridiculous, but it is objectively true. Jeff Bezos pressed certain keys in a certain order and built Amazon. Someone else pressed different keys and built a lifestyle business making $220,000 a year, working 18 hours a week. Both are just typing on keyboards. The skills that determine which keys to press that is all that separates the outcomes. Figuring out exactly what to sell, figuring out how to acquire customers, figuring out how to manage your time and energy while building alongside a job. These are all learnable skills. Books exist about every single one of them. Courses exist about all of them. Free YouTube videos exist about all of them. You could spend a year reading the 20 best books about online business, consuming the best podcasts, watching the best tutorials, and you would have a better business education than most MBA programs provide. The information isn't the bottleneck here, taking action is. Speaking of action, let me address what actually stops most people. In my experience, it comes down to three specific problems, and each one has a solution. The first is the idea problem. I don't know what to sell. I don't know my niche. I don't feel like I have any marketable skills. This traps people in endless research mode. They watch videos about dropshipping, read about affiliate marketing, explore coaching, consulting, content creation, digital products. Each new option seems promising until they realize they don't know exactly which one to choose. So they keep researching, hoping clarity will eventually strike like lightning. Here's the truth: there is no perfect idea. The idea you start with is almost never the idea that ultimately works out, but you have to start something to discover what does work. Think about any other skill you have learned. The car you are driving now probably isn't the first car you learned to drive in. The first sport you ever tried probably isn't the one you got good at. The first job you had definitely isn't your lifelong career. Why would business be any different? You try things out. You learn what works and what doesn't. You iterate until something clicks. Almost any niche can work. Almost any business model can get you to six figures in income if you execute it well enough for long enough. The paralysis around finding the single right idea is just fear of starting disguised as strategic thinking. The second problem is the sales problem. Even if I had something to sell, how would I get anyone to buy it? I don't have a following. I don't know how to market. It feels sleazy to sell things. There are really only three ways to get customers: create content that attracts them organically, pay for ads that reach them directly, or do outreach to them one-on-one. That is it. Every business uses some combination of these three methods. Most lifestyle businesses lean heavily on content because it is free, builds trust over time, and compounds as you create more of it. Content creation feels intimidating until you realize it's just sharing what you already know with people who don't know it yet. You don't need to be the world's foremost expert. You just need to be helpful to people who are a few steps behind you on some journey. The third problem is the time problem. I have a job. I have responsibilities. I don't have time to build something on the side. This is a real concern, but it's also solvable. Financial freedom doesn't require quitting your job and working 85-hour weeks on a startup. It requires consistently carving out focused time, even just an hour a day, over a long enough period. Most people have much more discretionary time than they realize. The hours spent scrolling social media, watching TV, browsing the internet without purpose. Those hours could become the foundation of something that eventually replaces your job. Time management, energy management, and focus management are skills just like any other. People who are naturally productive aren't naturally anything. They've just developed systems that help them use their limited time well. So how do you actually approach the timeline? There are really two distinct paths, and understanding both helps you choose what fits your life. Some people front-load the pain. They compress several years of extreme sacrifice into a short, intense period. They live in the cheapest possible housing, drive the cheapest possible cars, spend the minimum possible on food, work on their income streams every night and weekend, no vacations, no dining out, no entertainment spending. This approach can achieve financial freedom within 3 to 5 years, even on modest incomes. It works because it combines aggressive expense reduction with intensive skill building and income stream development. But it's not sustainable for everyone. Some people have family obligations that prevent this level of sacrifice. Some people have health limitations. Some people simply aren't wired for that level of intensity and will burn out completely. The alternative is a longer, slower path. A bit more comfort now in exchange for freedom arriving in 7 to 10 years instead of 3 to 5. Both paths work. The choice depends entirely on your circumstances and your tolerance for discomfort. What doesn't work is trying to have it all simultaneously. A comfortable lifestyle now and rapid progress toward freedom. The math doesn't allow it. Something has to give. The front-loaded approach is harder in the moment, but easier in total because the suffering is compressed. The gradual approach is easier in any given moment, but extends the total timeline significantly. Neither is wrong, but you have to consciously choose rather than defaulting into a path that promises comfort now while silently extending the timeline indefinitely. Here is something nobody tells you about this journey. You will try things that don't work, and that is not failure. That is data. Most people who achieve financial freedom tried multiple approaches before finding the one that worked for them. They started a blog and discovered they hated writing. They tried selling a product nobody wanted to buy. They attempted a service business that didn't scale the way they hoped it would. Each apparent failure taught them something vital about themselves. What kind of work energizes them versus what drains them? About the market. What people actually want versus what people say they want. About execution. What actually moves the needle versus what just feels productive but isn't. The people who never achieve financial freedom are usually the people who either never started anything or gave up after one attempt that didn't work immediately. Skills compound over time. The copywriting you learned for the failed blog helps you write better landing pages for the successful course later. The marketing experiments you ran on the product nobody wanted teach you what resonates for the product people do want. The systems you build for the unscalable service business become the foundation for the scalable one. Nothing is wasted if you are paying attention and learning from it. This is fundamentally different from how school teaches us to operate. In school, you submit the assignment once, and it's either right or wrong. In business, you iterate continuously. The first version is almost always wrong. The 10th version is usually getting somewhere. The 20th version might be making real money. Expect to try multiple things. Expect most of them to not work out exactly as planned. Expect the thing that eventually works to be something you couldn't have predicted at the very beginning. One thing that makes all of this dramatically easier is having a community. You can't underestimate how much harder this journey becomes when you try to do it entirely alone. The people around you right now probably don't understand what you're trying to do. Some might actively discourage it. Others might support you in theory, while modeling behaviors that pull you back toward normal life. Finding other people who are on the same journey changes the entire game. An accountability partner who checks in weekly on your progress. A small group of people who are building things and share what they're learning. Online communities centered around the type of business you're trying to build. Even just consuming podcasts and content from people who are where you want to be. It surrounds you with voices that reinforce the direction you're heading rather than pulling you back. The 5 people you spend the most time with shape your expectations for what's normal and possible. If those 5 people think financial freedom is a fantasy, you will struggle constantly to maintain belief. If those 5 people are actively pursuing it or have already achieved it, your sense of what's possible expands rapidly. This might mean spending less time with certain friends who drain your motivation. It might mean deliberately seeking out new connections who are further along the path. It might mean joining paid communities or programs specifically because they put you in rooms with the right people. The investment in community often pays returns that far exceed the direct education or content you receive. Being around people who treat financial freedom as normal and achievable rewires what your brain considers realistic. There is also a practical truth that separates people who succeed from people who stall out. Automation and systems beat motivation every single time. Motivation fluctuates wildly. Some days you feel driven and energized. Other days you feel depleted and resistant to work. If your progress depends entirely on feeling motivated, your progress will be inconsistent at best. Systems work regardless of how you feel in the moment. Automatic transfers that move money to savings and investments the instant your paycheck arrives. Automatic bill payments that prevent late fees. Scheduled content creation blocks on your calendar that happen whether you feel like it or not. Processes and templates that reduce the friction of doing the necessary work. When the behavior is automatic, it happens consistently. When the behavior requires a fresh decision each time, it happens only when conditions are perfect. The most successful people I know don't have superhuman discipline. They have systems that make the right behavior the default behavior. They remove the decision from the equation entirely. This applies to both the financial fundamentals, saving, investing, expense management, and to the income building work. Schedule the time. Show up during the time. Show up during the time. Do the work during the time, whether you feel inspired or not. Over months and years, this consistency compounds into results that seem impossible to people who are still waiting to feel motivated. Finally, understand that learning never stops, and the return on learning is often higher than any other investment you can make. A $25 book containing decades of someone's experience is absurdly underpriced. A $75 course teaching skills that could generate thousands in income is a no-brainer investment. Even expensive coaching, if it helps you avoid major mistakes and accelerate progress, often pays for itself many times over. The people who achieve financial freedom tend to be relentless learners, not just at the beginning, but continuously throughout the journey. The landscape changes. New opportunities emerge. New skills become relevant. The difference between someone who reads one book about business and someone who reads 50 books about business is enormous. Not because any single book contains the secret, but because patterns emerge across many sources. Mental models stack, understanding deepens. Most people dramatically underinvest in their own education. They will spend $600 on something that sits in a closet, but resist spending $75 on a course that could change their income trajectory. Make learning a permanent habit. Audiobooks during commutes, podcasts during workouts, books during downtime. The knowledge compounds over years into a massive advantage over people who stopped learning after school ended. And that brings me to the thread that connects everything in this video. Financial freedom isn't complicated. Lower your expenses. Build scalable income streams. Develop the skills required to make that income scale. Stay consistent for long enough to see the compounding kick in. Simple to understand. Extremely hard to execute. Hard not because it requires genius or luck, but because it requires sustained effort in a direction that most of society doesn't understand or support. What makes it hard is the same thing that makes most valuable pursuits hard. It requires doing things differently from everyone around you. Living below your means when others upgrade constantly. Building skills in your spare time when others relax. Saying no to purchases and experiences that everyone else says yes to. The sacrifice isn't permanent. 3 to 7 years of intentional effort can create decades of freedom, but those 3 to 7 years are genuinely difficult, and most people quit before the compounding becomes visible. The people who make it aren't smarter or more talented than the people who don't. They just kept going longer. If any of this resonates with you, if you recognize that the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't information but implementation, then there's something you should know. Everything I've described in this video is financial literacy in action. Understanding how money actually works, how income scales, how expenses create leverage or destroy it, how systems outperform motivation, how skills compound over time. The reason most people never achieve financial freedom isn't that they are incapable. It is that nobody ever taught them these principles. School never covered it. Parents often didn't understand it themselves. The financial industry profits from confusion, not clarity. I made a complete breakdown of financial literacy that goes deeper on all of this. How debt compounds against you, how inflation erodes purchasing power, how to build systems that make wealth accumulation automatic, how the psychology of money sabotages people who don't understand it. If anything in this video made you realize there are gaps in your understanding, concepts you've heard but never fully internalized, strategies you know about but haven't implemented, that video is your next step. Because here is the truth about financial freedom. You can't achieve what you don't understand. You can't build what you can't visualize. You can't execute what you haven't learned. The path exists. Thousands of people have walked it. The only question is whether you will spend the next few years building toward freedom, or whether you will spend them hoping things somehow change on their own. Most people choose hope. Most people stay stuck. You have just spent 30 minutes understanding what actually works. The principles aren't secret. The strategies aren't complicated. The path isn't hidden. The only variable left is what you do next. Start today, not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Pick one thing from this video that resonated most strongly. Implement it before you go to sleep tonight. Then pick another thing tomorrow. Then another. 1 year from now, you will look back at this moment as the turning point. Not because the information was revolutionary, but because you decided to actually act on it. The people who achieve financial freedom aren't special. They're just the ones who started and then kept going.